Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hi, I'm Crystal Hansen.
And I'm her husband, Mark Victor Hansen, and you are watching the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
How great is this? I'm live from Georgia at an Airbnb. My daughter graduates Friday. I've been celebrating her all week on the show. And high school graduation was really for us as the parents, right? It's like we did it. We got this person to proto-adulthood, right? And now that she's graduating from college and she's like, it took me a long time. Like, who cares? This is all for you. Like, this is your youth, like no help really, to do this. Yeah, we can guide and everything, but how about that? How about graduating from college and the world is now your oyster, but now it's time to go oyster farming,
It's fascinating because, as you may or may not know, I've got 10 honorary doctorates because universities don't want to pay guys like me because I'm so we're exorbitant expensive speaking talent because we're quasi-famous, having sold 500 million books. But it's interesting. I love to urge kids on their way and say, look, commencement means what commencement means. It's the beginning, not the end. It's not the end of your education. It's not the last book you're going to read. It's now you get the freedom to really get the freedom of freedoms and read all the self-help action books, read the zones that you want, and become a polymath, meaning have diversified interests and expand your intellect because it's your mind. And that's what we're going to talk about today in our book, Ask the Bridge from Your Dreams to Destiny. Ask yourself who you can become to fulfill your destiny now that you're graduating college, because this is a big experience.
It is such a big experience. And whether that education is academic and a BA or a BS or, journeyman status somewhere, I mean, it's a huge first step and get you going in the right direction. If you become a journeyman steam fitter, you're guaranteed to have a comfortable retirement if you just walk your way through those next 30 to 40 years of pipe fitting. It's there. But there's other things along the way, right? Like these mindsets that you're talking about. I would love to get into this. I was watching a show, and I can't remember the lady's name, but I watched your guys' episode with her as prep, and I will think of it, was this concept of out loud talking and getting deep into the cells and getting them all to kind of get pointed in the direction you want them to go. I thought that was fascinating, that your brain needs more convincing than just a shallow thought.
Right. Oh, it absolutely does. And that's why we wrote the book, Ask the Bridge from Your Dreams to Your Destiny. And what we discovered is there are actually 3 channels through which you need to learn to ask in life to fulfill your destiny, to get where you want to be going, and also to transcend the difficulties in life. Because, when kids graduate, that's just the beginning, like Mark said. And honestly, your education goes on for a lifetime. So we say, ask yourself, ask others, and ask God. And that ask yourself part is particularly important. That's sort of the beginning point, discovering where you want to be, where you want to go. And it's that reflective journey. So we're just super excited to share the book because we're getting so much amazing feedback, particularly now, since everyone's been shut down and the world has changed so much. There's never been a more important time to take what we call this asking journey and start to determine what, your next steps in life are going to be.
We have a lot of elite operators, SEALs, Green Berets, Delta Force guys. And what are the things they do? They demand of their body. The body's like, hey, we're quitting now. And they just, I'm a rock star. Nothing can hurt me. David Goggins is like, you don't know me, son. He just yells that out. You don't know me, and just wills themselves through that physical barrier, and they push on. Is it okay to demand? I mean, how do you balance out asking and demanding and all these different ways of getting something out of yourself so that you truly are getting to the right spot and not just, like, I hate when people say, oh, you have to work harder, you have to train more. Like, you can't work harder or like at some point you have to adjust what you're doing.
Well, let's talk to that because we've done a lot of military lately meetings, and we're very close to the SEALs and we've done all the Wounded Warriors. So we're very keen on military. So I want you to understand that first. But let's talk about the ask. What we've discovered since the book came out in April, so it's only been out a little while and it's rocking, But what we've discovered is that everyone that gets it needs to get not one book, but now last night we were told on a big podcast, you got to do three. One for you and your partner, whoever that is. And especially now for students, Pete, is that what they got to do, because you really don't know very much when you graduate. All deference to how great our colleges are for a BA and a BS and all that. And we're degreed, but and thankfully. But the fact of the matter is, you need to go through the book question by question by question with one other partner, whether it's another student partner, a church partner, a military partner, a business partner, and really ask yourself this stuff, because our destiny is help people get to their destiny. And the only journey that God gave us, he gave humans three things that he gave nobody else: asking, imagination, and humor. No other animal in the kingdom or nowhere else has it. So we've got it, but we think we've looked at Ask now, and what's happened is the other day we got like 121 letters in a day that people said, holy cow, you've just transformed my life. And what I'm saying to every kid out there and every parent, the nicest thing from my point of view that you could give your kids, and we got 5 kids and 6 grandkids, is the Ask book, so they get on the journey, so they really know who they are, where they want to go, what they'd like to accomplish, because this is a lifetime now. For the first time, they're free to go out and do that. And I said 3 books. There's a 3rd book I'd ask people that can afford it. You and your partner, whoever that study partner is that wants to transform and discover their destiny, which I think is everyone. And then the 3rd one is, because libraries are so shut down now, I'd ask you to buy one and give it to the library and say, hey, put this at the front desk so people can really help it. Because a lot of people can't afford the book right now because 30 to 50 million are unemployed, underemployed, or unhappily employed. And this will get them employed towards the right livelihood.
And, can I add to that, Pete? Because I like what you were saying, like, do we power forward sometimes? And I know that military guys and ladies do that a lot. And, what I say, I'm a transformational life coach, and it's not always good to power forward if you haven't spent that time with yourself. And the most important time you can spend in your day, and I truly believe this, I know this by working with people for so long, it's that time you spend in that reflective journey with yourself. And the biggest part of that reflective journey is asking yourself these important questions, because you may be powering forward, whether it's physically, enduring, or whatever you're powering forward with. But what if you're not on the right track? What if there's something you're missing? What if there's something that you need to see that you've never seen before? Or what if you're hurting yourself in some way, not even being productive in your life? So taking that time with yourself is so important. And Mark and I say that there are actually 3 critical phases of the asking yourself part. And the first phase is, where am I now? Because if you don't stop and take that time all by yourself with a journal or a notebook and say, where am I now? Are things working? What's working? What's not working? Because, usually things aren't working 100% the way you'd want them. So what's working? What's not working? Why did I decide to do it that way? Is there another way? Is there something that's more effective? Is there something, am I happy with this? Is it bringing me happiness, joy, and satisfaction? Or is it bringing me pain and misery? So by seeing where you are right now, that gives you a starting point to create your map as to where you want to go. And you can only do that by asking the right questions. That's why it's so important to learn to do this, because otherwise you just stay stuck, or you stay lost, or you keep hurtling through outer space, with no direction. But the second phase, so the first critical phase is, where am I now, right? Because you got to know where I am to get where I'm going. Second phase is, where do I want to be? And Mark and I say, take that from your ideal scenario. Don't think small, think big, think your ultimate, think your nth degree. Don't be shy, don't be scared. Scripture says, ask and it is given, seek and you will find, knock and the doors will be open. So start with that nth degree of what your greatest vision is for your life, for yourself. What is that? Everybody has that. It's somewhere. Your dreams are in there somewhere, sometimes locked away in your heart. And that's why we're saying with Ask, the bridge from your dreams to your destiny, by asking these questions, we unlock those dreams in our hearts. So back to the second phase for a second. Where do I want to be? Start with this beautiful thing called imagination that God gave you. It's better than any supercomputer. No other animal has it. God made us with imagination to imagine absolutely anything you want. And any great thing in life, every single thing in life that has made a difference started in someone's imagination. So you We're saying start in your imagination and ask that second phase question, where do I want to be? And I'm going to start with the ideal scenario in mind. If I'm in my ideal job, doing my ideal thing, serving the most amount of people, what does that look like? Who am I talking to every day? All the little sub questions that come under that. How am I affecting them? How does that make me feel? You got to get in touch with the feeling of who you're becoming. And in that way, you start to create this unbelievable architecture for your life that God, made you to be able to create. Then the final phase of that, where am I now? Where do I want to be? Final phase is, what specific action steps do I need to take to get there? Because I promise you, when you start asking these questions, writing down the answers, you're going to think of things. You're going to be like, oh yeah, somebody will pop into your mind. That guy, I should talk to, or that woman, she knows a lot about this. Or I heard that on the radio the other day. Oh yeah, that's right. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call this person. Take action right then, because that is the universe, God's perfectly designed universe, answering you back, right? So get off the couch, pick up the phone, take some action, look it up on whatever you need to do. But it is so magical. I mean, this process is really amazing.
I love this. I love everything you said. I had 5 different conversational threads I wanted to pick up on, but let me just grab one here real quick. So I'm also a combat operator guy. I've been outside the wire much as anybody, and our default is always action. It's not always the right action, but hey, you come home and you're like, I don't have to work 20 hours a day. Well, these trees aren't going to chop themselves. Let me go chop these trees down. And you're like, why am I chopping down trees? You can easily lose sight of all of this reflection. The other tools that you're given, how do I sharpen them? Because if I just default to hard work, I never get to smart work. There's never a refinement, and there's never an elegance in what I'm doing. And that's one of the things that I struggle with, especially, is how do I find an elegant solution rather than just pulling harder or on the rope? If I never let go of this rope, I'll always be pulling on it. And that way I always have something to do. Doesn't mean that rope's attached to anything I need, though,
2 things. Number one, because it's a bifurcated question you just asked. Number one, about working smarter. Abe Lincoln said, I spend more time sharpening the axe than doing the actual axe chopping, because then I get it done in a quarter or half the time. And so that's that. And so then the second thing is, you got to ask yourself, how do I do this? You're going to tell yourself in the morning. And what we do is every morning is wake up and pray and meditate for an hour. And we ask ourselves, what is it we want to do? And then ask, what is the most omni-effective way, all-effective way to pull off what we do in 3 ways? And what Albert Einstein said so well, said, if I got an hour to solve a problem in life, my life depended on it, I'd spend the first 55 minutes determining the proper question to ask. But once I know the question, I could solve the problem in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's what Lincoln was great at doing too, is getting to the essence of this problem. What is the true root? We often look at something that's not the root and attack that thing, but it's a hydra and you're never going to get to it.
That's a good word.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey, I got a good word call from the doctoral listed Mark. Hey, the other thing I wanted to bring up is you have these tools and this desire to work or whatever, and reflecting. All of this stuff is great, but I love that you guys are focusing on a foundation of faith. And just because you have to say this, it doesn't matter what you believe in, however you care for the soul and the spirit, you have to do that. It's how does someone who doesn't have, I'm not saying you have to be God-fearing or any of the other words, but how does someone who doesn't have that kind of an element, they don't know how to care for spirit without, they don't want to do religion, they want to do something else, but how do they get to that starting point so they can move forward? Because I think it's easy to go find a church and get ministered to, but if that's not your bag, how do you get going? How do you find your spiritual node?
Such a good question. I think we can both contribute to this, but I just want to say that, what I tell people, because we get asked that question a lot of people don't have faith or they've lost faith. And I just say, when you look at the world and its magnificence, if you just look at nature, and Emerson's essay talked about nature and how the fact, if you just examine nature, you cannot help but see the divine, because there's no way all of this beauty, this intricate beauty, this intelligence came together randomly on its own. And it's interesting because a psychologist named Dr. Gary Schwartz, who worked at University of Arizona, wrote a book called The God Experiments, GOD. And he set out to prove that there's no way, everybody says, well, you can't prove that there's God, so everything's random. And he said, you can't prove it's random. And I can prove that it's not random. And here's how. There's no way the universe, life, living beings, babies, dogs, all this beauty, every flower in every different variety could have randomly been created. And he literally does these experiments by, and I won't go into the whole book, but he makes some amazing points. But what I tell people is imagine yourself for a minute. I think people don't recognize their own beauty. If you looked at yourself, and Earl Nightingale said this, if you looked at yourself through the right equipment, you'd see that you're not just a lump of material. You're actually, your cells are shining. Light is coming under the right equipment. You can see a human being has shining cells you're emanating light. And also that you're singing. There's a sound, there's a hum and a vibration, a song to each human being. Start to contemplate the reality of what you are. And then you understand that you were created by something so magnificent. Now, none of us really knows exactly. Has any of us witnessed the Creator with our own eyes? The only way we witness the Creator is through the creation, right? So just imagine that you're part of some big creation and start to recognize the beauty in yourself and the beauty in the world around you, even though it's not perfect, because this world is about learning. We're on this earth to learn. But you start to feel the joy of creation and feel the joy of yourself. And once you start doing that, just imagine for a minute that you're going to allow that creation into yourself and imagine merging with creation, because really that's what Jesus came to tell us. God is in me, I'm in God, and God is in you, and the kingdom of heaven is within. So it's like, we're not separate. God's not like way off in some other, far away eon, in the universe. He's right here, right now. God, the creator of the universe, is somehow inside of all of us. If you can just, maybe we don't need to know exactly what that looks like, but if we can just suspend our disbelief and sort of tap into the magic. Like, I don't understand how the magic works, but it's so beautiful when you just start to tap in and trust a little bit.
Just administratively for the audience, Sonia Morton Firth was the show that I used to prep. I remembered it finally when I calmed down from the intro, and I'm putting her link there going across. You guys can watch her episodes. I purposely won't cover a lot of the ground that she covered because you guys can watch that as part one. And then also go on Amazon and you can get Ask at that link that's below. If you're on the podcast side, it'll be in the show notes, just so you guys all know. And this is a great way to support what the Hansens are doing and what old Pedro here is doing for you. This faith thing, when I struggled with it, I was raised in a church. My dad had a degree in divinity, at an undergrad in sacred music. So I've been to a lot of church in my days. And as I've tried to sort this out, it's when someone asks me, how do you prove that God exists? I'm like, well, you look at the art that comes out from this. When an artist, and I'm a big U2 guy. So when U2 says God shows up and music is downloaded, or when Frank Stallone says, one day I got a gift from God and it was how to sing and play the guitar. He's like, and I just knew it. If these guys are saying this came from God, if it isn't God, what is it then? It's like, we don't know why gravity works. We just know that it works. We're working on understanding it, but there's no, we know that it works. And when we go further back into the process, we're like, we don't know. When I remember I walked up, I was in Milan. And my girlfriend and I were having a great night. We're out drinking and just having a great night. And I walked in. I had no idea what was in Milan. I just was there. And I walked up on the Duomo, which is like their big chapel. And it's this gorgeous place. Yeah. And you're just struck by it. Like, if there is no God, how does Silent Night exist if there's no God? That's a gift from God. These people are saying it, Friar Moore comes back and just writes it out. All the words, boom, one download. So if that exists, and they say it's from God, there you go. There's your proof of God. Now, how do we all get tuned into this download where so many of the musical artists we have on this show, they just have this river of music flowing through them. Again, where does that come from? And if it's not God, again, where does it come from? Right? I mean, they can't turn it off. They're just have to get it out of them to purge the well, And so how do we get to these kind of things if we don't automatically have this download of brilliance and everything else coming?
Well, by the way, because you asked how we do it secularly rather than spiritually. So let me just do it's 1974. I go bankrupt, lose $2 million in one day. We lost so much money so fast because I was building out of plastic, PVC, built geodesic domes, New York Racquet Club, Botanical Gardens. I'm 26, and I think I'm a hotshot. I think I've arrived, and I crash and burn so fast. I have no money, so I have to go to the library, which I'm good at, and check out a book, How to Go Bankrupt by Yourself.
Right.
Well, for 6 months, I'm despondent, disconsolate, and I want to commit suicide, actually, which is a lot of the problem with military and a lot of the problem with the people who suck in sequestration right now. And finally, I kept asking, what is it I'm supposed to do? And I'm actually talking to God. And what came to me is I'm supposed to talk to people that care about things that matter, that would make a life-changing difference. Well, the miracle that happened for me is I go down to my 3 roommates in Hicksville, Long Island, New York, and I ask.
I love this story. Keep going.
I say, God, is there anyone that you know that's speaking, that's young, not a lawyer, not a doctor, not a famous person, not a Broadway star? And the guy says, yeah. There's a kid a few years older than you. You'll love him. He's out in Hauppauge, Long Island, New York. And by the way, here's my ticket. I'm not going to take it. And I mean, that's a miracle. The point is, this is my right livelihood, which is what we're saying to every graduate student right now that's graduating high school or college, because I don't care whether you go to tech or whether you go to vocational or whether you go academic or business. The point is, I ask the question, I go out and see this guy talk for 3 hours. I'm mesmerized. At the end, I go up and ask him. I said, Chip Collins, Mark Victor Hansen, I want to buy your lunch if you let me in. Let me ask you questions. How do you do this? Well, he taught me what to do as long as I'd stay out of his marketplace, which was real estate, and I'd do life insurance. But for the first 3 years, I did 1,000 talks a year because I would sell and talk. That was all I was doing. I wasn't reading the New York Times anymore and polluting myself, which is a subset. You got to shut off all the negative news. And the first book I wrote was called Stand Up. And people said, you have that story. That story is good, kid. You have it in a book. So I did a book called Stand Up, Speak Out, and Win. And in a little audience of 6, 10, never more than 50 people, I sold everybody. I said, this isn't a New York Times bestseller. It's not a national bestseller, but it's my bestseller. And I want to sign to you, Pete, and your sweetheart, and your kids, and your dog if you have one. And I sold 20,000 copies. And at $10 each, made gross $200,000. I tripled my income. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. That's exactly where everybody is right now. The people that are unemployed, underemployed, or unhappily employed got to repivot. They got to revector themselves. They got to go to their deep inner knower and say, what is it you want me to do? Whatever forces may be, tell me what I'm supposed to do. In my case, it'd be, God, what's your destiny for me? God, what's your destiny for me? God, what's your destiny? It'll be revealed, and it'll happen usually in the middle of the night. So you got to have a pen and paper and say, hey, sweetiekins, I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night. And if that knucklehead Mark is telling the truth, I'm going to have the answer. But he told me I have to write it in detail. So I'm going to turn on a light. Forgive me, but I can't just write down an idea because in the morning I won't remember. Like the Silent Night had to be written in detail. He couldn't say, I'll remember that tomorrow because you won't remember it.
You had to write it down right when it showed up before it went away, because it is ethereal. It really is.
Oh boy, there's a good word.
Yeah.
I love that story. On occasion, every year, and for a long time now, I go back to my high school because no one really did this for us. And I'm just honest with the seniors primarily. And I talk to them and I'm like, I'm you from the future. Here I am. Any question you want, ask me, and I'll be honest. And so they ask me ridiculous questions and I answer them. And one of my friends is a teacher now at the school. He kind of guides us through this conversation. But my basic advice is just go do things. You might think you know what you want to do, but the God's honest truth is, out of the 30 of you, probably 29 and a half of you will be doing something you never imagined that you would do. So don't be so hard on yourself for exploring. Don't be so hard on yourself for trying things. Your parents want you to go through college in 4 years. Go explore. Understand, go to junior college and take an array of classes. Take theater, take, pastels or whatever it's going to be. And then figure out where the A's are. And if you follow the A's, you will at least like what you're doing. Because if you race to being an adult and being in traffic an hour each way to work, it's really hard to reprogram your brain, and then you listen to the news and all these other things. It's really hard to get out of that trap. Is that too whimsical, though, to just say, go explore and try things?
No. Oh my gosh. I love what you're saying, Pete. I love that you talk to these kids, and it's the best gift you could give them, because I want to back it up a little bit. We started our book. When we come into this world as children, we're all so beautiful, so uncorrupted. We have this unashamed, unabashed desire to know everything, to learn everything, to experience everything. We want to know who, we want to know what, where, when, why, how, right? We ask, and never stop asking. And we also are really good at asking for more, And then suddenly, as life happens, depending on the way we were parented, what happened in school, what jobs we took, went into the military, suddenly it starts to feel like our opinion isn't valued, like our questions are shut down. Our parents say, yes, quit asking me. I'm tired of hearing from you. Your teachers tell you, don't ask any more questions. I didn't call on you, on and on and on. Maybe you're in a company, they just don't value, the boss knows everything, just be quiet and do what you're supposed to do. So over time, that amazing ability, that beautiful ability to ask questions, to be curious, to embrace everything in life and have fun with it is crushed out of us. And so many adults, we get to this point where we're literally ashamed that we don't have all the answers. Even these kids that come out of college, they're ashamed and they feel like something's wrong with them because they don't know what they're supposed to do. Or even at high school, they're ashamed of it. We're ashamed that we don't know everything. We're ashamed to ask. We're scared to ask anyone for help because we should already know everything or we should be able to do everything on our own. And that's why Mark and I wrote this book. We want to get everybody asking again. We want to help everybody become master askers. We all need to, we were born with the ability and most of us have lost it. And in the book, we write about the 7 roadblocks to asking, because most of us now carry around these incredible roadblocks that stop you from asking. And so we can talk about those if you want.
I do. And I want to start that conversation off by saying, I am just short of notable in the podcast world. My podcast is fantastically successful. And one of the KPIs in this effort, right, when you look around is when you've been doing it so long and it's been so hard that you look around and none of your peers, your cohort, when they're all gone, you're in the right direction. And when you look around and you're starting to realize your peers are people like Joe Rogan, others, that's when you're doing it right. I never knew what I was doing. I just kept doing it and then get better and better and better at it. That roadblock thing, those 7 things, one of the questions people ask me a lot, like, how do you do this? Like, how do you sell 500 million books, Mark? Right? Like these kind of questions, you start with, first off, you got to write. And if you don't write, you're not a writer. And that's simple. Like what you do every day is what you can be. The thing they say is like, how do you get people like, the 2 of you? How do you get Mark and Crystal to come on your show? How do you get these world famous musicians? And you know what I say to them? I swear to God, this is true. I ask them. I don't borrow. Oh, they'll never want it. I never say no for them. Like the worst that happens is I send something in and they don't respond. I'm going to send emails out. I start by just simply asking, and then maybe I follow up. Maybe I ask again later on. I just literally ask. That's my advice to them all the time.
I love that. It's so interesting. You want to cover the roadblocks or you want to?
No, you.
Okay, so let's talk about the roadblocks, because what you're doing, Pete, is so hard for people to do. So the roadblocks are unworthiness, and I would say that's the most prevalent. So many of us live with this subtle level of unworthiness, and it's just conditioning from our childhood or our early years that tell us we don't deserve better. We're just not quite good enough, or we're just not enough. The second one is naivete. And that's an important one, more than people realize, because I tell a story in the book about this adorable little Filipino woman who worked for me when my kids were born 16 months apart, and she helped me with the babies, and she'd make these wonderful dishes from her homeland. And she came one morning with this fruit and cut it up on a plate, handed it to me, and it was this juicy orange fruit. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Melda, when I bit into it, I'm like, this is the best fruit ever. Where'd you get it? What is it? She goes, it's a mango. And I'm like, a mango? Why have I never had a mango before? I've been all over Europe. I've traveled so many places. She's like, I got it at the grocery store. And I'm like, how could I be passing by this fruit at the grocery store? Every time, how do I miss the best fruit in the world? But it made me think, I'm naive to mangoes. I grew up in Idaho where there are lots of potatoes, but no mangoes. I just don't have that life experience. So I'm very naive about that. What else am I naive to? What else am I missing in life? What amazing people am I walking past every day that might be my next best friend, my next colleague, or somebody that I could make a world of difference to, or opportunities that I'm passing by, because I'm just not aware they even exist. So it made me realize I need to be a lot more curious. I need to ask about everything. I need to bring that childlike curiosity back. And that's why naivete is our second roadblock, because so many of us get in our trench. This is the way we were born. This is what we do. And we never get out of it. And that curiosity just keeps us from our blessings, keeps us from the juiciest things in life, right?
Can I jump in here? Because I'd like to spend a little second or two here. When I was working overseas, you've got these people from the State Department that are there to advise Afghans or whatever it is. And because they are never the dumbest person in the room, or they're never, like, they always have all the answers, they are the dumbest person in the room. Like, they actually make themselves stupid to where they'll say things that you would never normally say in a real conversation. You know, like, so the governor, this is the governor in the place in Afghanistan where we're living, and they say, I am going to do this. Now, if the commander had said that, they'd write it down in their book and they'd make sure they worked on that problem. But if the governor says it, they say, no, we're going to do this instead. And it's like, it blows my mind that we don't just sit there and go, okay, this person has this impossible problem set to solve. We're trying to enable them to have a better government and connect people to the government, right? And you're going to tell the governor that what they're deciding to do is wrong as your default answer. It's you don't even know how naive you are. Like, you're arrogantly naive. And it's so easy in life in general to do these things, to make way more mistakes than you ever have time to realize. You know, your unknown unknowns that you never deal with because you always think you're right. You know, like, not discovering a mango or avocados have become a thing in the last 20 years. Like, oh my God, avocados, they've been around for a long time.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it. It's so easy in life in general to do these things, to make way more mistakes than you ever have time to realize. You know, your unknown unknowns that you never deal with because you always think you're right. You know, like, not discovering a mango or avocados have become a thing in the last 20 years. Like, oh my God, avocados, they've been around for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. But like those guys, the opposite, you know, they don't ever stop to go, does this guy have a point that I'm not seeing? Or should I be paying attention because maybe I'm missing something, you know? So it's just that constant naivete. Doubt is another one. Doubt is just that sort of gray area that's like, that didn't work out before. I asked that one time, or no one's ever done anything for me. So it's a terrible way to live, just that gray zone. You know, I doubt it'll turn out, so I'm not even going to try. The next one is excuses. And I really think that comes down to, you know, stubborn pride. How many people do you know that you're like, hey, well, just ask him if this, or do you need some help, or just ask me for help? And they go, nope, I don't need anything. I got it. Nope. They want to be the Lone Ranger. So they just suffer. Too much stubborn pride to ever ask anyone for anything. Next one is fear. And that's just that terror that people feel about rejection, you know? And I think it comes down to people's need to be loved. You know, as humans, we all want love. And so it's like, when someone rejects us, it sort of feels like they just pulled love away or pulled approval away. And so we have so many good stories and ways in the book of dealing with that, and we'll talk more about that. But the next one is pattern paralysis, and that's really just, you know, getting stuck in the same old thing. Just you do the same thing last week, last month, and last year, and you're going to keep doing it next week, next month, and next year, and it doesn't work, and it's making you miserable. And I know you know people like this, and we've all probably been through periods like this in our lives, and it never changes, and it's never going to change until you look at your pattern and start to question it. Is this working, right?
Can I jump in? I want to add some color to these things. I don't want to rip by them too fast because these are such great life lessons. So
good.
I'm sort of the mayor of my class. I organized the last reunion and everything, and I kind of talked to everybody. And one of the things that bugs me about reunions is my friends and other people who are like, hey, you plan this reunion, how do I do it? And I'm like, when people say, I don't want to go, you know, it doesn't matter to me. I'm like, yeah, but what about that person that's been desperate to talk to you for 20 years? Like, give them that thing, and then they're going to give you back this adoration. Like, oh my God, I've been waiting to talk. How many times in your lifetime does someone look at you and go, oh my God, I've been waiting to talk to you for 20 years, you know, to surprise you or to tell you I love you or to care about you. You can't, that pattern, that, you know, that rejection of, that was 25 years ago, but there's some real joy in these moments if you allow it. And the other thing I wanted to say before we got too far past it is, how many times in life have like me or somebody, anybody, you asked someone, you're like, I'll ask this question. And it's for the person says, funny you should ask. We've been talking specifically about doing more podcast or whatever it is, right? An opportunity, the door just goes and opens up, and you're like, all I did was take a flyer on asking, and they were already, and I think some of that is, if not divine, that vibration where you're like, And then if I go, I think I need to act on this. I've trained myself to go against my natural hesitation. Okay, I'm going to shut up now and let you guys talk.
First of all, I got to do the joke that fits going to the class reunion and you being the mayor, because it's so good. The meme we got yesterday was one of the best I've ever gotten, and it says, remember that girl you were afraid to ask out at the prom back in high school? And she said she'd only go with you if you're the last man on earth that may be coming close. I don't know why. I didn't have that problem, but I love the meme. As for asking, the more you open up your mind, right? Because the mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. And the only way it opens, as far as we can see, is when you ask, because it gives you illumination, revelation, understanding, truth. And the example, when I was in graduate school, I was with Einstein's best student, who was my teacher, Buckminster Fuller. And Dr. Fuller, one day he and I were walking down the street, and he says, Mark, you can't ask a question without having an answer. And he said, do you know what that tree is? And I don't. He said, just watch what happens during the next 3 days. And 3 days later, somebody says, isn't that walnut tree the greatest thing you ever looked at? Exactly what you're saying. And that's why we're saying, hey, look, you got to know the right question to ask to the right person at the right time, because it may take 20 years, 25 years for the next class reunion or the last one. And you're going to get the right answer, but you've got to keep asking the questions. And the quickest example I can give that, after I'd gotten divorced, I wrote down 267 things I needed in my ideal wife. We had to have the same values. We had to spiritually be alive. She had to be beautiful, likable, personable, all those kind of things. And I never told her until after we got married. She is 267 out of 267.
Get
because
out. I love it.
True. I'd ask for what I want. And we put it in the 20th anniversary of Chicken Soup for the Soul that says how to find your loving soulmate, which she is better than a soulmate, because if you light two candles, as you know, and put them together, it jumps. It's called exponential, eightfold. And it just, and that's why they call it twin flame. And we resonate at a very high level. I believe, and this is, again, remember, it's done only according to belief. I believe everyone out of 8 billion people on the planet has a twin flame, but you've got to be asking to find him or her.
Yeah. And looking for it.
Right.
I actually get this. So because of my reunion, I fell in love, and she fell in love with me, with one of those girls from my class. And, so we never dated. We were both popular, but we just didn't share the same kind of circle. But, I'll be danged. Here it is. I went to the reunion and came back with someone that I love the heck out of her. That's all I can, so you never know what's going to happen, right? You take these opportunities, and goodness gracious.
Well, yeah, stay curious, stay in wonder. Like, a lot of people just blow off their reunions, but you made that decision, started wondering how, if you could make a difference there. Maybe you're going to touch someone else's life. So all these questions start to open our lives so tremendously. It feels, when you start doing it, like you live in this magical world, and you just have to remember to keep asking. I'm just going to mention the last roadblock, because I think it's important, and that is disconnection. And for me, this is kind of the saddest one of all. And I think you see a lot of people in this state right now, Pete, with COVID and all the, uncertainty it's caused. And that's where you just disconnect from the dreams in your hearts. And, you really get to the state of hopelessness and apathy. So you just give up on asking, you give up on everything. And that's why this is so important for Mark and I. I mean, we don't have to work another day in our lives if we don't want to. But, we spent a year writing this book because we know this message, and we're spending lots of time getting it out there and promoting it. Every time this gets in someone's hands, we know that person can have a huge life shift. And we know this individually because books have changed our lives. It was books and CDs that brought Mark out of bankruptty, started listening to Cavett Roberts, and then started asking himself. So that one thing that can just, like that little $16 can give you, a lifetime of value when you take that journey. And, Yeah, it's just, we want to bring everybody's dreams back to life because you're important. We say this in you are important in the book. You're important, you matter, and your life matters. It matters. And we don't always understand how our life matters, but we're here for a reason. It is a journey. It is a journey of learning. It is a journey of evolving. So that's why we need to keep asking and stay in this childlike wonder, because you don't have to have all the answers, and you need to quit beating yourself up about that. You're here to learn, keep asking, and keep exploring.
It's like we're best friends. We all have the same kind of thoughts and everything. I talk all the time about, like, you can always tell me the last time you were in a rage, you got mad. It was probably 20 minutes ago. But when was the last time you were struck by just straight wonder? Like, how many do you ever gather wonder? And nobody does. Like, we don't ever think about that, you know? And so yes, we gather anger. Yes, we gather frustration. I was literally, the call before you guys was me talking to my therapist at the VA, and I was aggravated because the VA is a big organization and it's hard to get good care sometimes. But I also know the last time I had wonder, I sat down with my daughter for the first time in forever, and we had breakfast, and I was just tapping my feet. I was so excited to see her. And so I try to keep the scale balanced because it's really easy to gather a bunch of the other stuff. But, you know, I definitely push that. So I definitely want to encourage people. First off, I mean, look, these two know what they're doing. Mark, you've sold 500 million books. You don't do that because you aren't unsuccessful. These folks will help fill your well with good things. So watch the news and drive yourself crazy, and then balance it out by getting something like any of Mark's books, but especially, you know, what Crystal and Mark have written here with Ask, because you're going to have opportunities to do this. I love that you guys are on this mission. I wanted to ask this. Day-to-day life, you have to work. You have to put a roof over your head for your kids and for your family and all that kind of thing. And maybe you just don't have a lot of time when the end of the day is coming, because we got to work out 1 hour a day. We got to save for our retirement, all these things we have to do. But I would submit that's probably working. Oh gosh, it's hard to say. You're probably working too hard for someone else's pleasure. If you work for somebody else, figure out what you owe that company and give them that. You know, ask yourself, like, when does it stop for me where it's going to be okay? Like, you know, when you're deployed in a combat zone, I like to take naps, recharges my brain. It allows me to reflect a little bit. And I come back with answers. But a lot of people, until they get the elegance in their work, they'll just work. And so they'll look kind of cross at me when I go to do that. But I'm like, it's okay. There'll be war when I'm done sleeping. Like, it will still be here, and I'll get right back to work, but I'll be rested and prepared for this attack. How does one sort this out? How do you sort out? I'm not saying 8 and hit the gate, but I'm also not saying 8 and hit the gate.
First of all, that question's loaded, and I love it. And so, first of all, we believe in rest and restoration, and that's why 1 day out of 7 you're supposed to chill your jets. But the way we say it is, you paint your calendar green for work days that you really work, yellow for clean up the mess days, because we all have mess. You got financial mess, you got garage mess, you got the kitchen mess, you got mess, clothes you got to do, wall laundry, all that. But then the purple days are days when you totally disengage from the work. So you do chill your jets. And we just took a 10-day vacation with our family down in Florida and walked the white sand beaches in St. Pete and Clearwater. And it was Treasure Island. It was beyond magnificent. And we came back and we're really renewed. And then, you know, what happens is that we're asking ourselves some big questions, because we really want to make the world work for 100% of humanity, and physically and economically. And that means we've got to overcome war. And what you're saying about all the great stuff you did in Afghanistan, what we got to do is raise up so everybody has fundamental abundance, so they don't have a reason for war anymore, as far as we're concerned. And I understand that sounds naive and it sounds impossible, but for the first time in human history, we have the technology that can do that. Then the other thing that you indicated there was, because we're in this sequestration, that we're in this lockdown, which is government imposed. Our corporate symbol, as you know, is a butterfly, and my 1 Minute Millionaire, which so many military guys read and came out, and then they decide to be an entrepreneur, which is a critical question. Is, you don't want to give your whole life to the company sold. I lost my, the whole Johnny Cash song. I won't sing it to you, but you become a caterpillar. We're in sequestration, going to high flying butterflyness. And I'll just take the depression that shut down America in 1898. 4 things came out of it: that everyone got rich, that were paying attention. And right now, that's the same thing is going to happen now, but bigger, better, $50 trillion worth. But we had the Wright brothers create the airplane. We had Henry Ford create the automobile. We had a little guy create, first of all, electricity, and then photography and movies, right? And then last but not least, we got a guy created this thing, telephone, all of which guys were called crazy and addled brain and impossible. And if man was meant to fly, the Wright brothers' daddy, who's a minister like yours, said if man was meant to fly, he would have been born with wings. Well, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, and don't forget Marconi. He's then too with the wireless and everything. I mean, that made the world a lot smaller in an instant. You know, it was an incredible time. How did someone get to work in the chrysalis? I mean, okay, so wait, let me back up and say this. One of the things I've noticed about the world in general, especially from combat, because combat is just like the hardest form of who we are and everything, is our strategy and our theory and all of these high level things. They don't reliably connect to what you do day to day. And I don't mean just tactically, I mean the ground truth. Like, what is the next step I take to get off the couch to, pour a grain of sand into the bucket that feeds my strategy, my outcomes? So how does someone reliably do that? How do you reliably, okay, great, daily prayer, got that. I'm going to go for a walk for an hour every day. I'm going to schedule yellow time for cleaning the house, whatever it is, right? But like, what are some of these things that are even below that level? Like, what are the daily hardcore practices that if I just do them 6,000 times, my life will have a discernible benefit?
Right. And I think it's like, making and asking those questions of yourself that we talked about. You need to make that like it's your most important meeting every day with yourself. So you realign with yourself and the things that are important, because that's sort of your way to get excited, get motivated, get clear, because, we wake up every day and life happens and then we kind of aren't clear again, so we need to kind of start over, remind ourselves. And the best time, if you can do it, is in the morning, in that quiet time when your brain hasn't taken on a lot of things. It makes such a difference when you do that first thing in the morning, that planning time. And then you prioritize, asking the right questions, like, what are my top priorities today? What are the 3 most important things I need to do today? And take a second and imagine yourself finishing your priorities every day. That makes one of the biggest differences to me. If I just go, I have this long list, I need to get it done. If I look at the list and say, okay, this is how I'm going to do that. I'm going to be picking up the phone. I'm going to have this conversation. It's going to be a great conversation. Here's how we're going to resolve it. Blah, 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 blah. I see that in my mind. It's a fairly quick process, but it is amazing how then it just rolls out on its own, the things you want to do. And you've already kind of created the outcome, the way you want things to go. It makes it so much simpler. Your days roll out so much more easily, but you have to commit to this. It's a deliberate action. You can't let your life be lived randomly. I think so many people feel that life is just this random event, this random thing, and life is just coming at you, and you're just ducking and dodging and trying to keep the balls up in the air, right? That's not the truth. That's not the reality. The reality is your life experience, the way you experience life, is from the inside out. You create life in your own mind and heart, and then you express it outward. So stop thinking that life is happening to you. You can stop that right now and decide that you are affecting life. And this is how you're going to affect it. And almost, I love to think of things as a game because, again, there's nothing better than being more playful with life. We're too serious. I mean, we're like, oh, everything's awful and serious. And what if you just make this this fun game? And when you start playing it, you realize that it works. So the game's even more fun. Like, I'm going to do this. You just have to stick with it. You have to keep playing. You have to keep remembering the rules. Remember the rules. It's an illusion. If you think life's being created outside there, it's not. You are creating your life. Create it so deliberately and start having fun with it.
Mark, you were talking about on another podcast I saw, it might have been on Sonia's, but you were talking about kind of an accomplishment bookkeeping. We tend to, if we make a list, we tend to make the list too long and we get beat up by our list. And then getting things done counts. And that leads to a lot of things getting done over time, but only if you do some bookkeeping. It seems like you have to say, hey, actually, I got 15 things done today. It's a monster day. It's okay to have a good day, even though it was just little things. There are 15 little things less on your list for the next day.
I love your question. So the point we're making here is ask yourself, what do you want to do? And then write it out And then when you accomplish them, it's not like I got the milk, I got the eggs, I got the butter and cross it out. Instead, we're saying get a purple pen, which we have lots of in this house because purple is the highest color of the electromagnetic spectrum. It's closest to God. It's what you wear in spiritual levels. And then put victory next to it, because what you're saying is the big word, because you love big words, is vicissitudes of life. Meaning the crap's going to hit the fan, brother, and you better be ready because it's going to pulsate. It's going to go up and down. It's no different for you than for us. And if it does, if you look back at the victory list, it's better. Now, again, I did a giant podcast last night with all over the world, but it was fun because I said, hey, look, this lady had written her 101 goals, and I said, look, 10% of them are going to accomplish almost automatically within a day or within a couple of days. Her name is Susan Sly. I'm going to recommend you have her on your show. But she went out and did that, and now she is doing phenomenal. And she had all these other people from around the world that are her buddies and said, hey, look, I don't know why it worked. Here's why it works. You figure out what you want, because ask and you shall receive. The second line is, it says in Habakkuk, write a thing, make it clear, it shall be established on you. That's definite certainty, biblically speaking. And I know you don't want me to OD the Bible because some people don't care, but if they've never heard it, at least they're getting to hear it secondhand from me. And the point is, when you write it, it's already true, but you keep adding to it. But you start with, I teach 101 goals, because different goals have different gestation rates. A chick egg takes 21 days, a human embryo 9 months, an elephant 2 years. The point is, you're going to hit all your goals over time. Like, as you know, when we wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, we went in 144 publishers. They actually didn't say, get rid of me. They said, hit the road, Jack, because Dr. Canfield, Jack Canfield. And I'm glad you're old enough to know that line. And Jack's a great guy. I'm teasing about that. The point is that we had written down we'd sell $1.5 million in a year and a half, and then 5 million, and then 10 million, and 50 million, and the publishers all went. And then Crystal will tell you, they've come back to us and said, boy, I blew it. I've lost millions of dollars. What I don't usually say, but because you're so open and I want to share, our agent wrote us a letter and said, look, you guys, nobody wants you. I don't want you. I'm firing you. I'm no longer your agent. Well, that cost them tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah. It's funny how, and the podcast world is a very similar thing, you know, and by the way, my show is pretty damn big. We got 90 countries that listen to this thing. So let's flex up when possible. But
by the way, right now you're going to get to all 224. We're cheering you on.
I know, right? Yeah. I want to get to Christmas Island, even if I got to move somebody there and like give them a radio.
I love that.
Oh man, now I lost my train of thought on the thing I was going to say. Oh, it doesn't matter.
Reaching people
around the world, 90 countries is where you started.
Before that, I was going to say something. It was in context to what you were saying. Either way,
writing goals and making victory lists, and because a victory list does this, it has you pat yourself on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you're really good." I know that today you got hit in the solar plexus, or you got smacked in the face, or you got a black eye, but tomorrow you're going to rise again.
Yeah.
And all of us go through peaks and valleys. There's nobody's life that doesn't pulsate. And that includes the richest man in America, Elon Musk, which I'll just do that story because a lot of people are feeling sour right now. The governor shuts him down, and he is such a good thinker. He calls up the head of 3M and said, look, you guys can't make ventilators. I got 3D printing. I got all the metal you could want. I got 90 engineers on the thing. Let me print them. But when he printed them, he also printed 90,000 cars and became the second richest guy in the world, which back to your thing as a military guy, he did it logistically and logistically, right? He went over, under, around, through, and got to the other side. Because the goal here is to win, to conquer. And back to your question to Crystal, which I want to add to, the first person you got to conquer as a real leader is yourself. You can't conquer anything else unless you conquer your own thoughts and your own feeling by asking, how am I going to conquer this?
You know, one of the things we're big on here on the show, the KPI flows back. People are like, hey, you made me think about this differently when I saw, like, I like to talk about homeless people because it's just a horrible problem and it's easy to drive by them. But if I encounter someone at the gas station, or whatever, they're coming to me, and I think that as an opportunity for me to be of service to someone. So I'm like, what do you need? You know, because it's not my job. I'm not their drug counselor. It's not my job to do anything for them. They are living on the edge of life. And so if they say they want cash, if I have it, I give it to them because they don't have enough of anything. And if they're going to get high with it, that is what they do already. they're already going to do that. So I give it to them. I'll offer them. I'll say, how about I buy you a bag of tacos? And I'll literally go out of my way to go buy them tacos and everything else. And these kind of moments when you see that person, you think, how can I help this person? Do they want help? Hey, do you need anything? That's a good question to ask someone who's homeless. And if they're like, leave me alone. You've done it. You've given them what they want. You leave them alone, But if you're like, can I buy you something? Can I get you some food? Can I, whatever it is, that service aspect that we all should be working on. You guys must have a powerful charitable charter, something you guys do. I know you support vets, but how do you guys reckon with that? That's another line in your schedule, is like, how do we give and how do we encourage other people to give?
Right. Well, we are super involved with childhelp.org. They've rescued like 10 million children out of child abuse. And it's such a hidden epidemic in our country. They started overseas and then they built it up. They've been acknowledged by basically every president. These women, we tell their stories in the book. And I mean, it will bring you to tears. Talk about asking, they were in a situation where there were little Hollywood starlets. Yvonne Feddersen, one of the founders, they're now in their 80s, but she was on every major television show at the time and was dating Elvis Presley. And they got moved over to a tour, a USO tour with Bob Hope. They were on the streets of Japan and found these shivering little children out. A typhoon was coming in, and because they just were restless, wanted to get out of the hotel. And they walked up and they're like, oh, Mama-san, Papa-san, and they're like, the kids are like, no, Mama-san, no Papa-san. They're like, they didn't even have shoes on their feet. So they kind of wrapped their coats around these kids and shuttled them back to the hotel, sneaked them in the back door because it was a nice hotel. Because when they traveled that way, they got general status, I think that's the way it works. So they got taken care of really well. And they got the hotel staff to work with them because they knew that the general would freak out if they brought these kids back. They gave them baths, dressed them in their clothes, had the hotel staff bring up food for them because they were starving. And they realized these were basically mixed race kids, and they were most likely our soldiers' kids who were just being turned out of the orphanages because the orphanages, so many people were dying, the orphanages were too crowded. And so these kids were just set out to die. And they said, God, what do you want us to do? We know we can't just leave them. And they knew, like, God put in their hearts, they could not leave this alone. When the general said, you got to get rid of those kids. What are you doing? You've got them in your room. They're like, he goes, you need to take them somewhere, put them back out. They said, we can't do that. That's not going to happen. They spent the next day, they had a day off, going to every single orphanage in the city, and finally got one woman, Mama Kin, who had a tiny little house where kids were hovered over hibachi, but she would take the mixed race kids. They said, no matter what, if you will just take, she said, I don't have enough food or place for them. And they said, if we put doors on, rebuild your windows, put windows on and doors, will you take them? And we promise you forever, we will send you the money for these kids if you'll take care of them. She said, okay. She got the troops the next day to come in. They entertained the troops and passed around the hat and said, hey, here's what you need to do. You need to put all your extra cash in here because some of these might be your kids. And we also need you guys to come with us tomorrow to fix this place. And they got everybody in line, marching to their orders, and they fixed the place, started Orphanages International, became Child Help. Now they've helped 10.5 million kids. But, these kids, who's going to be their voice if we aren't? Isn't that a question, right? They can't do it themselves. And so we need to ask these things. Who's going to help this person if I don't help this person today? And no, these people aren't perfect. They're messing up, but they're a human being that needs that little bit of help from you. And I love that part. In the book, we talk about asking others and how important that is to create human bonds, and how, whether it's in business or whatever, we're so scared to ask. But all the studies that we did for the book show that if you're just willing to get out there and ask, there's an 80% chance that your request will be received and someone will help you. So we need to stop being afraid to ask. And then the other side of that circle is we have this section in the book called Being a Grantor of Wishes. There's something amazing that happens to a human being that when we help someone, it's part of who we are. We're not meant to live a selfish life. And the more selfish we are, probably the more miserable we are. When we live our life with a spirit of service, like, how can I help? And we have some beautiful stories in there. I'd love for everybody to read the book, because there's just It's a life changer. It's a spirit and soul changer. And more importantly, I want to hear from everybody. I read my messages on Facebook. So reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Let's connect, because asking creates a bond with all of us, and we need to be more bonded.
And Pete, I just want to add to that. We want to thank all the military, because the military really helped out our ladies, Sarah and Yvonne, and they just got such great pictures of everybody. And then once the military said yes, Bob Hope said, okay, I'll stay, and we're going to have the whole talented troops treat you guys right, because you rebuilt the whole orphanage. You brought food for all these kids. You hugged them. You loved them. And it makes me cry. They brought Christmas presents for kids that they didn't know and maybe never see again and wouldn't have anything to do with normally.
Yeah,
the military, we got the best military in the world, sir.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And our desire to help is just incredible. I mean, we don't ever stop with that stuff. The other thing I wanted to add about all of these things, like taking the time to build community, like the homeless dudes, there's a couple of them that even recognize me. Even if I'm not there, I wave at them, because I want them to have an opportunity to have someone that's on their side as much as I'm able, because they've likely burned all the bridges with the family and everything else. Maybe they're not mentally capable of doing it, but when they see me and they see my truck, they know they're going to at least get a wave. And if I've got time for them, and it's not the ideal solution, but it's part of the solution, is to build this community thing. And the other thing is that I say this quite a bit, but charity isn't supposed to be easy. If these things were easy problems to solve, they would be solved. These are hard things that require you to bend your back. But like you said, Crystal, like this pays off. Like this absolutely, it's remarkable how when you put that effort in, what you get back, you're like, come on, why am I getting back all this greatness? I just want to do this out of good heart. And then all this love and positive and opportunity, it just always comes back. It's incredible.
And that's really why I sold more books than anybody. We tithe on every book I've ever written. We decide who we're going to tithe to that makes a difference. And long ago, I tithed to the girls like the first time 30 years ago, and then we've never fallen out of thing. And then we moved to Arizona 5 years ago or so, and we re-met with them, and they said, well, we need you to really chair this thing. And I go, oh man, we're busy as we could be. We don't have time to do that. And part of being happy is being productive. The line is, you're made in the image and likeness, which means for me, two things: you got to create and you got to contribute. And you say, well, you've written 312 books, you should quit. There's nowhere that says, go thou and retire, you're now a millionaire. Go thou and retire, you're now 55, 65, 72 and a half. That's not the goal. The goal is, and I'm not opposed to fishing, I'm not opposed to retirement. When I wrote the book with Art Linkletter, I said, retire, put on new tires, go in a new direction. Because if you're alive, you've got a destiny. And part of what you're saying is you've got a destiny to source and serve. And you can help that guy in the street. You can help somebody learn to read that can't read, because 4 billion people in the world can't read. And it will give us all freedom at new levels.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Everybody get Ask on Amazon. Get any of the Chicken Soup books, but especially get Ask. You hear what Crystal and Mark are talking about, and it resonates with me. I try to default to grace. It's so hard these days, but that's why graciousness is such a gift, because you've got to work at it. And I'm happy that you guys came on. I really appreciate it. Every time you guys have a project, come on the show and let's fill the world with some light and some positivity and help folks just have a different chance to. The other thing about when you fall off the wagon, I say the wagon always stops. You can always get right back on it. And so reinvention, all of these retiring, you just do it. And if it fails, you just do it again until you get it right. You change it up and you keep after it. And I appreciate you guys for keeping after it, because you're really doing something great. And if nobody else has told you to today, from all of us out here in the big wide world, thank you. Thank you for all of it, because you're really making a difference. And we appreciate it.
We love doing it. We love you, Pete, and we love all the people out there listening and reading and writing to it. So thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for creating this platform, Pete. It is so important for people.